Title: Cinderella's Shocking Blind Date with a Billionaire CEO. Xiao Yu never believed in fairy tales, not since her parents' bakery closed and left her fending for herself in the bustling streets of Shanghai. By day, she was a part-time waitress and full-time dreamer, and by night, she was the designated housemaid for her two demanding stepsisters, Mei Mei and Lulu. But unlike Cinderella in the books, Xiao Yu didn't have a fairy godmother, just a knack for finding joy in small things, like her favorite bubble tea shop around the corner. One evening, as she hurried home, the unmistakable sound of her sisters bickering filled the apartment. Mei Mei was holding a glossy flyer, while Lulu squealed excitedly. "There's an elite blind date event at the Pearl Tower's Sky Lounge," Mei Mei announced, her eyes glinting. "Only the city's richest and most eligible bachelors will be there. And the app guarantees perfect matches," Lulu chimed in, twirling a strand of hair. "This is our chance to snag someone rich." Xiao Yu placed her bag down quietly, but the moment Mei Mei spotted her, she smirked. "You're coming with us," Mei Mei declared. Xiao Yu blinked. "What? Why?" "Because we need to make a good impression," Lulu explained. "But don't get any ideas. You're just there to fill space." Xiao Yu wanted to refuse, but their scowls warned her it wasn't optional. Resigned, she agreed, wondering what fresh humiliation awaited her. The Sky Lounge was dazzling, a glass-walled paradise overlooking the glowing Shanghai skyline. Guests milled about in elegant gowns and tailored suits, sipping champagne under glittering chandeliers. Xiao Yu felt out of place in the outdated cocktail dress her sisters had tossed her. She tightened her grip on the table assignment card. Table 7. Taking a deep breath, she approached her seat. A man was already waiting. His presence was commanding, his suit impeccably tailored. His chiseled features and sharp jawline could have belonged to a movie star, but it was his eyes, piercing and intelligent, that caught her off guard. He looked up and a smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "Are you my date?" Yes," she managed to stammer. "I'm Lin Hao," he introduced himself, extending a hand. "Xiao Yu," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Little did she know, Lin Hao wasn't just any man. He was the CEO of Lintech, a billion-dollar company that made headlines across Asia. "So, Xiao Yu," Lin Hao began, his voice smooth but warm, "tell me about yourself." Xiao Yu hesitated. "There's not much to tell, really. I work in hospitality." "Hospitality?" Lin Hao raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "That's a demanding field. What do you do for fun?" Xiao Yu smiled shyly. "I like to explore the city. And bubble tea." Lin Hao chuckled. "Bubble tea? That's unexpected." "And what about you?" Xiao Yu asked, trying to steer the conversation away from herself. "I run a tech company," he said casually. "Wow," Xiao Yu said, impressed despite herself. "That sounds complicated." "It has its moments," Lin Hao admitted, "but I enjoy it." Their conversation flowed naturally, and Lin Hao found himself captivated by Xiao Yu's unpretentious charm. She wasn't like the other women he'd met, women who were polished, practiced, and far too eager to impress. Across the room, Mei Mei and Lulu watched with growing disbelief. "Why is she talking to him?" Mei Mei hissed. "That's Lin Hao. He's the richest man here," Lulu added, her voice filled with envy. "Ugh, we'll deal with her later," Mei Mei muttered. The next day, Xiao Yu was back at the noodle shop, her mind drifting to the rooftop conversation. Lin Hao had been unexpected. She shook her head, scolding herself for entertaining such thoughts. Her day passed uneventfully until, during the evening rush, a familiar figure entered the shop. "Lin Hao?" Xiao Yu gasped, nearly dropping a tray. "Hello again," he said, his tone playful. "I was in the area and thought I'd stop by." Xiao Yu's co-workers exchanged wide-eyed glances as Lin Hao casually ordered a bowl of noodles and sat at the counter. "Why are you really here?" Xiao Yu asked as she handed him his order. "I wanted to see you," he replied simply. Her heart skipped a beat, but before she could respond, Mei Mei and Lulu stormed in, their expressions thunderous. "You've been lying to him," Lulu announced, loud enough for the entire shop to hear. "What are you talking about?" Xiao Yu demanded. "She's just a waitress," Mei Mei sneered, pulling out her phone and showing Lin Hao photos of Xiao Yu cleaning their apartment and delivering food. Later that evening, Lin Hao found Xiao Yu sitting on the steps outside the shop, her eyes red from crying. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked gently. Xiao Yu looked away. "Because I knew you wouldn't understand. You're you, and I'm me." Lin Hao sighed, sitting beside her. "Xiao Yu, I don't care what you do for a living. I care about who you are." She glanced at him, hope flickering in her eyes. "You really mean that?" "Yes," he said firmly. "But you need to believe in yourself as much as I believe in you." Months later, Xiao Yu found herself standing in her parents' reopened bakery, which Lin Hao had helped her restore. It had become a local sensation, with customers lining up for her family's traditional recipes. On the shop's anniversary, Lin Hao surprised her with a ring, kneeling in front of the ovens as the scent of freshly baked bread filled the air. "Xiao Yu," he said, his voice full of emotion, "you've shown me that love isn't about wealth or status. It's about finding someone who inspires you to be better. Will you marry me?" With tears streaming down her cheeks, Xiao Yu nodded. Yes. As her family and friends cheered, Xiao Yu finally allowed herself to believe in fairy tales, because sometimes they really did come true. "Xiao Yu!" Mei Mei's voice pierced through the tiny apartment they shared. "Come here, we have something important to discuss." Xiao Yu wiped her hands on her apron and hurried to the living room, where her sisters were giggling over a magazine. "There's this app, Date Destiny, and we've just signed up for a mega-exclusive blind date event," Lulu declared with a smirk. Mei Mei shoved a flyer into Xiao Yu's hands. "They're pairing up participants with Shanghai's most eligible bachelors. You're coming too." "Me? Why?" Xiao Yu asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because," Lulu sneered, "we can't show up looking outnumbered. Besides, no one's going to pay attention to you in that." She gestured dismissively at Xiao Yu's frayed jeans and oversized hoodie. With no way to refuse, Xiao Yu reluctantly agreed, secretly dreading the humiliation she was sure to face. The night of the event, the blind date venue turned out to be a luxurious rooftop restaurant overlooking the Shanghai skyline. Dressed in a borrowed dress that clung uncomfortably and with makeup Mei Mei had hastily applied, Xiao Yu felt completely out of place. As she stepped onto the terrace, the cool evening breeze tousled her hair, and she clutched her small purse tightly. Around her, the elite of Shanghai mingled effortlessly, their laughter ringing out like the chime of expensive crystal. "This is a mistake," Xiao Yu muttered under her breath, considering fleeing back to the familiarity of her tiny noodle shop. "Table 7, she reminded herself, scanning the room for her assigned seat. When she found it, her heart skipped a beat. Sitting at the table was a man unlike anyone she had ever seen. His tailored suit hinted at wealth, but it was his commanding presence that made him stand out. His sharp jawline and intense eyes gave him an air of authority, yet there was something approachable in the way he casually scrolled through his phone. He looked up as she approached, his gaze locking onto hers. "Are you my date?" he asked, his voice smooth but tinged with amusement. Yes," Xiao Yu stammered, suddenly hyper-aware of every awkward detail about herself. "I'm Lin Hao," he introduced himself, extending a hand. "Xiao Yu," she managed to reply, her palms clammy as she shook his hand. "Please, sit," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. Xiao Yu sat down, her nerves buzzing. She had no idea what to say to a man like Lin Hao. He seemed like the kind of person who moved in circles she could barely imagine, let alone belong to. "So, Xiao Yu," Lin Hao began, his tone polite but curious. "What do you do?" I work in hospitality," she replied, trying to make her job sound more impressive than it was. "Interesting," he said, his brow arching slightly. "And what do you enjoy outside of work?" Xiao Yu hesitated, then decided honesty was her best bet. "Bubble tea and exploring the city when I have time." Lin Hao chuckled, a genuine sound that took her by surprise. "Bubble tea? That's refreshing." "What about you?" Xiao Yu asked, trying to deflect the focus. "I run a tech company," Lin Hao said casually. "Oh," Xiao Yu said, struggling to mask her surprise. "That must be stressful." "It has its moments," he admitted, his gaze steady. "But it's rewarding." Their conversation flowed more easily than Xiao Yu had expected. Lin Hao was surprisingly down to earth, asking her questions about her life and even sharing stories about his childhood. Across the room, Mimei and Lulu glared at the pair, their jealousy growing with every passing moment. "Why is she at that table?" Mei hissed. "Does he not know who she is?" Lulu snapped. They exchanged a knowing glance and slipped out of the lounge, their expressions gleaming with malice. As the evening wore on, Lin Hao found himself increasingly charmed by Xiao Yu's straightforwardness. She wasn't like the other women at the event, who seemed more interested in his wealth than his personality. Just as the mood grew lighter, Xiao Yu glanced at the time and panicked. "I'm sorry, but I have to go," she said abruptly, standing up. Lin Hao blinked, surprised. "So soon?" "I have work early tomorrow," she lied, not wanting to admit that her sisters had set a strict curfew for her. Lin Hao stood as well, his eyes searching hers. "Then let me walk you out." Xiao Yu nodded, her heart racing as he escorted her to the elevator. The next day, Lin Hao couldn't stop thinking about Xiao Yu. There was something genuine about her that had captivated him. Acting on impulse, he used his resources to track her down, not to her job as a waitress, but to a small, run-down bakery she visited every weekend. When he arrived, Xiao Yu was kneeling on the floor, scrubbing tiles. She froze when she saw him. "Lin Hao," she gasped, standing up abruptly. "I thought I'd surprise you," he said, his voice laced with curiosity. "This place, does it mean something to you?" "It was my parents' bakery," Xiao Yu admitted, brushing her hands against her apron. "They built it from scratch, but after they passed, I couldn't keep it running." Her vulnerability touched Lin Hao. "Have you thought about reopening it?" Xiao Yu laughed bitterly. "I barely make enough to cover rent. This place is just memories now." Lin Hao's gaze softened. "What if I could help?" Over the next few weeks, Lin Hao worked with Xiaoyu to restore the bakery, using his connections to modernize the space while preserving its charm. Xiaoyu was hesitant at first, but eventually embraced his help, pouring her heart into reviving her parents' dream. As the grand reopening approached, Lin Hao surprised her once more. "Xiaoyu," he said, holding a small velvet box. "I've learned that wealth means nothing without someone to share it with. Will you make me the luckiest man in Shanghai?" Tears filled Xiaoyu's eyes as she nodded. Yes. Under the glow of the bakery's new sign, they sealed their love story with a kiss, proving that sometimes fairy tales do come true, even without a fairy godmother. As they entered, a waiter handed her a card with her table number. She shuffled nervously to her assigned spot. "Table 7, she muttered, finally arriving. To her surprise, the man seated there wasn't just handsome, he was breathtaking. Sharp jawline, impeccably tailored suit, and eyes that seemed to see right through her. "I'm guessing you're my blind date?" the man asked, his deep voice smooth as silk. Yes?" Xiaoyu stammered, cursing herself for sounding so unsure. "Lin Hao," he introduced himself, extending a hand. "Xiaoyu," she replied, shaking it hesitantly. Little did she know, Lin Hao wasn't just any man. He was the CEO of Lin Enterprises, one of China's biggest tech firms. An unexpected connection. Lin Hao raised an eyebrow as he studied Xiaoyu. Her simple dress and awkward demeanor were a stark contrast to the polished, high-maintenance women he usually encountered. Intrigued, he decided to keep the conversation going. "So, what do you do, Xiaoyu?" "Oh, I'm in the service industry," she said vaguely, unwilling to admit she was a waitress. Lin Hao chuckled. "That sounds mysterious. Let me guess. Spy? Secret agent?" Xiaoyu laughed despite herself. "Not quite." As they talked, Xiaoyu realized Lin Hao wasn't as intimidating as he appeared. He had a dry sense of humor and a surprising knowledge of street food. Meanwhile, at a nearby table, Mei Mei and Lulu were fuming. "Why is she with him?" Lulu hissed. "He's the richest man in the room." Mei Mei grumbled. "This is a disaster." The twist. At the end of the evening, Lin Hao turned to Xiaoyu with a curious expression. At the end of the evening, Lin Hao turned to Xiaoyu with a curious expression, his sharp features softening under the warm lights of the rooftop lounge. The hum of conversation and clinking glasses faded into the background as he studied her. "You're different," he said, his voice quiet but deliberate. Xiaoyu blinked, caught off guard. "Different how?" Lin Hao's lips curved into a slight smile. "Most people here come with a script. They know what to say, how to act, and what they want from me. You don't seem to care about any of that." She laughed nervously, glancing down at her borrowed dress. "That's probably because I don't belong here." "On the contrary," Lin Hao said, his tone firm yet kind. "You're the only person I've met tonight who's been real." Xiaoyu's cheeks flushed. She wasn't sure what to make of his words, but there was a sincerity in his eyes that made her heart skip. "I guess I don't know how to pretend," she admitted, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I like that about you," Lin Hao said, his gaze lingering on her. Before she could respond, a waiter approached, signaling that the evening's formalities were coming to a close. Lin Hao turned back to Xiaoyu, a playful glint in his eye. "Thank you for tonight, Xiaoyu," he said, holding her gaze. "It's been refreshing." "Thank you for not laughing at my bubble tea obsession," she replied with a small grin. He chuckled, his laugh warm and genuine. "I'll admit, it's made me curious. Perhaps next time, you can show me your favorite spot." Xiao Yu's heart fluttered at his words, but she quickly brushed it aside. "We'll see," she said, trying to sound casual, though her cheeks betrayed her with a deep blush. As Lin Hao escorted her to the elevator, she couldn't shake the feeling that this evening was more than just a chance encounter. And as he watched the elevator doors close, Lin Hao couldn't help but wonder the same. "I enjoyed tonight," he said. "Would you like to meet again?" Xiao Yu blinked in surprise. "Really?" "Yes, you're different," he admitted. Before she could respond, Mamie and Lulu stormed over. "Xiao Yu, time to go," Lulu announced loudly, glaring at Lin Hao. Confused, but too embarrassed to argue, Xiao Yu left with her sisters. As they rode home, Mamie sneered, "Don't think this means anything. He'll lose interest the moment he finds out who you really are." But Xiao Yu couldn't shake the memory of Lin Hao's warm smile. A chance encounter. A few days later, Xiao Yu was rushing to deliver an order at the bakery where she worked part-time. As she rounded a corner, she collided with someone, spilling coffee everywhere. The collision was sudden and chaotic. Xiao Yu gasped as the steaming coffee splashed across the pavement, staining her apron and dripping from the paper cups she was carrying. She looked up, her face flush with embarrassment and frustration, only to find herself staring into the startled eyes of a stranger. He was tall, with messy black hair and sharp features softened by an apologetic smile. His dark blazer and loosened tie suggested he was coming from work. "I'm so sorry," he said, crouching to pick up the toppled cups. His voice was warm, his tone genuinely contrite. Xiao Yu quickly bent down as well, her hands fumbling to gather the remains of her delivery. No, it's my fault. I wasn't watching where I was going." Their hands brushed as they both reached for the same cup, prompting them to freeze for a moment. Xiao Yu felt a strange flutter in her chest. The man chuckled softly, breaking the silence. "Well, I think we're equally to blame for this mess." He stood up, extending a hand to help her to her feet. "Are you okay? Did you get burned?" "No, I'm fine," Xiao Yu replied, brushing herself off and accepting his hand. "But my boss is going to kill me for ruining the order." He glanced at the spilled coffee, then back at her. "How about this? I'll pay for the damages, and I'll help you carry whatever's left. Deal?" Xiao Yu hesitated, but his earnest expression was disarming. She nodded reluctantly. "Deal, but only if you let me buy you a coffee afterward. A proper one, not this disaster." The man grinned. "It's a date then. I'm Wei, by the way." "Xiao Yu," she replied, unable to suppress a small smile as they began gathering the remaining cups. As they walked side by side to the delivery address, Xiao Yu couldn't shake the feeling that this unexpected encounter might lead to something more than just spilled coffee. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, scrambling to clean up. "It's fine," said a familiar voice. She looked up and froze. "Lin Hao." "Xiao Yu?" he asked, surprised but amused. "What are you doing here?" she blurted. "I own this building," he replied casually. "I was checking on the tenants." "And you?" "Just working," she admitted, cheeks burning. "Ah, so the mystery is solved," he teased. Instead of mocking her, Lin Hao seemed even more intrigued. Romance blooms. Over the next few weeks, Lin Hao found excuses to visit the bakery. He'd order pastries, chat with Xiao Yu, and occasionally help her carry heavy trays, much to her co-workers' delight. At first, Xiao Yu thought Lin Hao's frequent visits were purely coincidental. He always seemed to arrive during her shift, claiming he just happened to be in the neighborhood. or had a sudden craving for the bakery's signature custard buns. But his charming grin and light-hearted jokes soon made it clear. He wasn't just here for the pastries. Her coworkers quickly caught on, shooting her knowing looks every time Lin Hao entered the shop. "Your number one customer is here again," Mei teased one afternoon, nudging Xiaoyu with her elbow as Lin Hao walked in. Xiaoyu rolled her eyes, but couldn't hide the warmth in her cheeks. "He's just being friendly," she muttered, though her smile lingered. That day, Lin Hao ordered an almond tart, his third visit that week. As he handed over the cash, he lingered at the counter. "So, Xiaoyu, any plans after work?" She blinked, caught off guard. Just going home, I guess." "Perfect," he said, his eyes twinkling. "I was thinking I could finally repay you for that coffee. There's a great cafe down the street. What do you say?" Xiaoyu hesitated, glancing at Mei, who was eavesdropping nearby and nodding encouragingly. With a small laugh, she turned back to Lin Hao. "All right, but only if you promise not to spill this time." Lin Hao placed a hand over his heart dramatically. Scout's honor. The cafe outing marked the beginning of something new. Over the next few weeks, their connection deepened, built on shared laughs, stolen glances, and late-night conversations about everything from favorite books to wild childhood stories. For Xiaoyu, who had always focused on her studies and work, Lin Hao was like a fresh breeze, unpredictable, warm, and full of surprises. And for Lin Hao, Xiaoyu was a grounding presence, her kindness and quiet determination drawing him in more each day. Their growing bond didn't go unnoticed. Mei and the other coworkers often teased Xiaoyu about her bakery beau, while Lin Hao's friends began jokingly calling him the pastry guy. Neither of them minded. Sometimes, fate had a funny way of bringing people together, and for Lin Hao and Xiaoyu, it all started with a spilled cup of coffee. One evening, he surprised her with tickets to a food festival. "You've been working too hard," he said. "Come on, it'll be fun." At the festival, Xiaoyu saw a different side of Lin Hao. He was relaxed, laughing as he tried and failed to eat spicy noodles. "You're nothing like I imagined," she admitted. "Neither are you," he replied, his gaze soft. For the first time, Xiaoyu felt like she was living a fairy tale. The ugly truth, but her happiness was short-lived. Mei Mei and Lulu, furious at being overshadowed, concocted a plan to sabotage her. Mei Mei and Lulu, two of Xiaoyu's co-workers, who had always craved the spotlight, grew envious of the attention she received. What infuriated them most wasn't just Lin Hao's frequent visits or the light in Xiaoyu's eyes. It was how effortlessly she seemed to captivate everyone around her. Determined to bring her down a peg, they whispered their plan one afternoon in the back of the bakery. "She thinks she's so special," Mai Mai sneered, her eyes narrowing, always getting praised by the boss and fawning attention from him. Lulu nodded, her lips curling into a mischievous smile. "We'll see how perfect she is after today. I've got an idea." Their scheme began the next morning. Lulu subtly switched the labels on Xiaoyu's tray of pastries, ensuring that orders were delivered incorrectly. Mei Mei, meanwhile, spread rumors among the other staff, suggesting that Xiaoyu was slacking off because she was too busy flirting. When the mistakes were discovered, the customers complained, and the manager's face darkened with frustration. "Xiaoyu, what's going on?" he demanded, his voice stern. I'm not sure," Xiaoyu stammered, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. She checked the order slips and realized they were mismatched, though she had double-checked them earlier. Mei stepped forward, her expression feigning concern. Maybe she's been distracted lately, with all the personal visitors and such. Xiaoyu's heart sank as her manager frowned. Xiaoyu, I need you to focus. If this happens again, we'll have to reconsider your position. Humiliated, Xiaoyu retreated to the back of the bakery, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. She replayed the events in her mind, confused and hurt by the sudden turn of events. That afternoon, Lin Hao came by as usual, immediately noticing her subdued demeanor. "What's wrong?" he asked gently, his brows furrowed in concern. Xiaoyu hesitated, unsure whether to burden him with her troubles. But the sincerity in his eyes broke her defenses, and she told him everything. Lin Hao listened intently, his expression darkening as she described the sabotage. "You're saying someone here did this on purpose?" "I don't know," Xiaoyu said quietly, her voice trembling. "But it feels like someone doesn't want me here." Lin Hao leaned closer, his voice firm. "Then we'll find out who. Don't let them push you out, Xiaoyu. You've worked too hard to let this go without a fight." His words gave her a glimmer of hope, but the battle was far from over. Unbeknownst to them, Mei and Lulu were already plotting their next move, their jealousy driving them to escalate their scheme. One day, they showed up at Lin Hao's office, unannounced. "She's been lying to you," Lulu declared, handing over photos of Xiaoyu cleaning their apartment and delivering food. "She's just a gold digger," Mei added smugly. Lin Hao stared at the photos, his expression unreadable. The confrontation that evening, Lin Hao visited the bakery. Xiaoyu greeted him with a smile that faltered when she saw his serious expression. "Is it true?" he asked, showing her the photos. Xiaoyu's heart sank. "Yes, but you should have told me," he interrupted, his voice tight. "I wanted to," she said, tears welling up. "But I was scared you'd judge me." Lin Hao softened but didn't reply. "I need time to think." As he left, Xiaoyu felt her fairy tale shatter, happily ever after. Days passed with no word from Lin Hao. Xiaoyu threw herself into work, trying to forget him. Then, one evening, as she was closing up the bakery, she found him waiting outside. "I've been a fool," he said. "I don't care about your job or your past. I care about you." Xiaoyu stared at him, hope flickering in her chest. "Really?" "Yes. But you need to stop underestimating yourself." "I'll try," she whispered, smiling through her tears. Lin Hao stepped closer, his eyes warm. "Good, because I'm not letting you go." As they shared their first kiss under the glowing Shanghai skyline, Xiaoyu finally believed in fairy tales. Just a little.
Thanks for watching. Please be sure to subscribe our channel.
The Stories book is a captivating collection of tales that traverse diverse genres and emotions, spanning the realms of fantasy, science fiction, romance, and mystery. Each narrative is a journey into the unexpected, weaving intricate plots and compelling characters. With a skillful blend of vivid imagery and thought-provoking themes, this anthology invites readers to explore the depths of imagination and discover the universal threads that connect us all. From heartwarming moments to spine, we hope you enjoyed these captivating video stories. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming content like this. Thanks for watching and keep spreading the video story.